Hello, boys and girls and children of all ages. Fat Bastard Wannabe Buddha coming at you today. I'm very sorry that I didn't do one of those stereotypical New Year's updates. Those great resolutions of what my predictions for the future holds, going over what happened in the last year and all the little nonsense that normally accompanies the new year. Truthfully, I think we're bottom feeding and we're just grinding away year after year after year, and I expect this not to change for any foreseeable future because the American people have not figured it out yet that the current economic problems is not individual problems, individual moral failings. It is actually a systemic failings of the basic capitalist system that we are enduring. But it's hard to explain that to someone because this week, this main blog is going to center around student loans. As everybody knows, I'm absolutely drowning in student loans. I owe $26,000, which isn't that bad, but it's the normal stock and trade for a basic BA degree. I got a degree in philosophy and psychology, basically. That means absolutely nothing because you can't teach as long as somebody is still there. So you can be an adjunct and hopefully drive all over creation in order to get some teaching jobs that ain't going to go anywhere fast. And in order for you to get in the front door, somebody's got to go out the back door. And unfortunately, no one's going out the back door because they can't afford to retire. No one's going to be able to afford to retire. That is going to be a luxury that we tell our great-great-grandchildren about. That there was a time in which, when you were 70, 80 years old, you didn't have to work at Walmart. But those days are long gone. They ain't coming back. We're going to have to tell our grandkids about that. It was a good time. It was a great time. What prompted this conversation is basically student loans. And I was trying to explain to several interlocutors this week about how you have to allow for debt to be canceled. You have to allow for some form of jubilee, bankruptcy, however you want to, zero write-downs of debt. The system has to allow for that because if the system does not allow for some form of debt cancellation, those who are in the process of lending have absolutely zero incentive to make sure that the people that they are lending to can afford to pay back their debts. So what happens is you have rampant speculations, and the whole financial situation, especially with debt is concerned, it's a little game. What they do is they loan out money to individuals. And then there becomes a market for this debt from large-scale institutional investors, money, mutual funds, pension plans, you name it. And since the debt is guaranteed to be repaid, this debt basically gets rated AAA, the best it can be, these collateralized debt obligations. The same thing happening to the mortgage funds. You had this massive amount of need to basically launder a lot of, trade imbalances with the Chinese government. The Chinese and the European nations had a massive amount of dollars that were seeking secure investment. So they bound up all these mortgages because no one fails to pay their mortgage off. Everyone pays their mortgage off. So they bound all these things up and they continue with selling it off to all these large money market funds and large scale investors throughout the world. And it creates an incentive for the banks to create more of these instruments, these debt instruments. And the same thing is happening with the student loan situation. We know how that came, what was the end result of the mortgage debacle. They loaned and kept making more and more and more loans, liar loans, you name it, arms. People were buying houses that didn't have to show any credit, didn't have to show any wages, the whole thing, because they had a market for the debt, because the banks themselves was not going to hold on to this debt. They was going to prepackage it up and sell it off to institutional buyers. Same thing is happening to the student loan situation. The large-scale banks have no incentives to go out there and make sure that the people they are loaning money to with student loans can afford to pay this debt back, because they're going to quickly turn this over, and the United States government will allow them to garnish wages, hound the people to the ends of the earth. This is one of the debts that absolutely cannot be discharged by bankruptcy laws. There's just no way to do this. The only thing that's probably even more extreme is probably payments to child care payments, or in divorce proceedings where you have to pay for your children that you fathered. This cannot be discharged. So it creates an incentive for the financial institutions to basically speculate like no tomorrow. It also creates an incentive for large-scale schools to become private schools, and these fly-by-night rented degrees, diploma mill institutions that are churning out degrees left and right. We got several in South Florida that all they do is they get all these individual children to come in there, and young adults or old adults thinking that, hey, they're 40 years old and they need a degree of some kind in order to compete in this marketplace. And the degrees don't mean jack. They don't mean anything. So they go in there and they get their degrees, and because, hey, if you pay somebody 20 to 40 to $60,000, they'll give you a sheet of paper saying that you can do X, whatever X is. That means I can philosophize and have psychology debates with people. That's what my degree basically means, which means jack in this society. So it gives these institutions to become diploma mills, and they getting paid by the students, and the students are getting a piece of paper when it's all said and done. As the banks are getting their guaranteed income stream for a long period of time that they can then sell off to institutional investors. And the unfortunate person who gets trapped in this system is faced with a massive amount of debt, and he's going to be working at Walmart or the Gap or one of the big box stores, and he's going to have his wages garnished, because no matter how hard he tries, unless he goes back and lives with mommy and daddy, and then for some of us, mommy and daddy are dead, we can't go back to live with mommy and daddy and have free room and board so we can afford to pay our student loans so they don't go into default status. Because eventually it does catch up to you. You get caught, and you miss a couple of payments, and eventually you find yourself in a wage garnishment situation, because it comes down to, hey, whether or not you want to have electricity in your house or pay that $200 to $300 student loan debt. But if you don't pay it, that $200 to $300 student loan debt ends up taking 26% of your wage. That's what happened to me. But I was trying to explain to individuals this week that you need a means to discharge this for the public. You have to have some means to discharge this debt. Otherwise, you create a situation in which you create moral hazard for the lenders, not just them, the individuals. Everybody talks about the moral hazard for, hey, if you allow for discharging of these debts, people go out there and rush out to the market and borrow. Well, the lenders have to lend to this. If you guarantee that they have to pay back this debt, lenders are washed in moral hazard, because they don't have to make sure they make an honest loans to individuals, because they're not going to be holding these loans. They're going to be paid off, and they're going to be packaging them up and sold off to somebody else, and they're going to get their money out of it. It's a giant churning operation. So I was trying to explain this to several individuals this week, and they're met with no understanding, absolute blank faces, and some form of moral indignation that you have to pay back debts, you have to pay back debts, you have to pay back debts, like it's some Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu first commandment of some kind. I have no idea, but every one of those institutions says you have to have Jubilee. You have to get rid of debts. Every single religious organization that has got more than 5 members to it and don't worship the dark side, but pretty much guarantees debt, some form of debt jubilee and debt cancellation, because of this very problem. They recognize it. But in this society, we have a huge moral Puritan streak and a vicious streak. A lot of people in this society are suffering. And when people suffering, it offers the individual 2 opportunities. They can become more empathetic to their fellow creatures, or they can become more belligerent and angry. And American society becomes more belligerent and angry and grievous oriented. We are a nasty species as far as what is has been bred in America. And it's not like I expect empathy from anybody in this society. I don't. The last people I expect empathy for died a long time ago. I don't expect empathy from my close little friends, my little brothers and stuff. I gave that up on illusion a long time ago, because this society has no empathy. It cannot afford empathy. It's a luxury in this society. You have to get ahead at all costs in this society, and if you have even a modicum of empathy in this society, you will be ground into the dirt. And that is what happened. We have whole generations, in order for certain institutional investors to be ground into the dirt for their money. And it's not going to change, because they will convince a large portion of society, especially those who are investors, those who are into baby boomer things, that those millenniums or those younger generations made poor moral decisions, that they will make this an individual problem, that it was an individual problem. It wasn't a systemic economic problem throughout the whole structure of the system. That's what the truth is. This is a systemic failing of the system. No, they're going to make sure it was an individual moral problem. That's what we do on every single situations that we confront in this society. We make it an individual moral failing. And as long as we do that as a society, we can grind people into the dirt. And no one cares, because they can't afford to care anymore. This is the Fat Bastard Wannabe Buddha. That's my New Year's. It's going to be just like it was. We're going to continue to grind people away, slowly but surely. Hope you enjoy it. Have a good day.